The following message is a disclaimer for this podcast. Recently this past week, allegations of questionable behavior have come out against someone in the local Ontario independent wrestling community, someone very prominent. I do talk about that person in this episode, and I'm sure all of you in the Ontario independent wrestling community who are listening to this know who I am referring to. I would like to note that this podcast was recorded prior to these allegations coming out, one day prior, as a matter of fact. And I in no way condone their alleged behavior. Also, there are other parties in this podcast that I do bring up that I also talk about as well that have had past allegations against them. I would like to point out that this podcast is simply talking in the context of the time this event took place. And again, I in no way condone their alleged actions. Thank you. It is now time for Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. And now here he is, the man who has all episodes of S Club 7 on VHS, Bill Chase. Thank you, Mr. Podcast Announcer, and welcome to Diary of a Wrestling Fan, the podcast that chronicles my 33, almost 34, amazing years of being a fan of the wonder that is professional wrestling. Thank you for listening on Spotify, on Anchor, wherever podcasts are streamed. Hit subscribe, hit follow. Just keep on listening. I'll keep bringing you more content, even though I've been behind lately. I am so sorry for that. Things in my life have been very chaotic, more than I want them to be, believe me. But either way, if you're listening to this on YouTube as well, hit that subscribe button right now. Well, before we get started on Alpha-1 Wrestling, my first ever Alpha-1 Wrestling show, Stage 2. This took place on February the 20th, 2011, the same night as WWE's Elimination Chamber pay-per-view. Same day, I should say. This was in the daytime. Either way, though, what a day this was for me. My first independent wrestling show in quite some time at that point. I think almost 3-4 years. And I was really looking forward to it. And I'll tell you the backstory of how I ended up there and what this did for me personally in terms of my experiences on the Ontario independent wrestling circuit. I can't believe it has been 10 years since this show. Unbelievable. A lot of these guys still around, still kicking ass today. Love it. Elimination Chamber, same thing. A lot of those guys still around, still kicking ass today. But yes, it was just a wonderful day to be a wrestling fan, and that is what this podcast is all about. But before that, speaking of wrestling, I'm plugging Pro Wrestling Ontario. Let me tell you something. If it wasn't for me attending this show, there might not have been a Pro Wrestling Ontario. I'll go as far to say that. You can check us out on YouTube. If you're listening to this on YouTube, scroll over to the right side of the screen. There's a link to our channel. Hit subscribe. Watch some videos. Hit like. Comment. Hit that notifications bell. Just be informed of what's going on in Pro Wrestling Ontario. New episodes of Foundation every Saturday at 3 p.m. Wow. Follow us on social media as well, on Instagram and on Twitter. Give us a follow there. And also give us a like on Facebook. All right, well, here it is, the show that, well, I'd say changed my life in a really good way. This is Alpha-1 Wrestling's Stage 2. Now, in the history of the world that is professional wrestling, a lot of things have gone unearthed, if you will. One of those things is the history of professional wrestling in this town. Sure, there's a lot of historians who know about it. I myself have been fortunate to learn a lot. But that being said, there's just so much that the world still should learn. I'm hoping that there's more stuff out there that people will dig up. I know lately there's been a lot of interest in it. The history of wrestling in this town has been incredible. And you know what? I think the story deserves to be told. There have been some great wrestlers to come out of here in Hamilton. Off the top of my head, the man I quote at the end of every single episode of this show, Billy Red Lyons, came from here. Well, he's more from the Dundas area, yes, granted, but still, he was tied in big time to the wrestling scene in this city. The missing link, Dewey Robertson, yes. Of course, as Dewey Robertson, he had a fantastic career. As the missing link, he had a fantastic run. So again, he came from Hamilton, Ontario, and of course, who could forget Canada's greatest athlete, Iron Mike Sharp. But that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface. That's just a prime example of how far back the lineage of the professional wrestling in the history of Hamilton goes. The old Hamilton Forum, which was on Barton Street, a long precursor to Cops Coliseum, of course. Long before Cops, the Hamilton Forum was our main arena in this town. Sadly, it actually shut down in the late 70s, and it was years later. It wasn't until years later we'd get Cops Coliseum until 1985. So we did get wrestling here in much smaller venues and whatnot, but in that time, it just, it wasn't the same until Cops, was built, and, they started hosting WWF shows at the Cops Coliseum, as well as Mosca-mania, baby. Yes, Angelo Mosca. Not from Hamilton, no, but this has been his home for many years, of course, a legendary member of the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And you know what? Mosca, he might as well be a Hamiltonian, so yes, I say he definitely ties into history in this town. But thing is, I've always loved independent wrestling, and I talked about it on my tape trading episodes. Again, check those out in the archives. I checked out independent wrestling from even across Canada. I even had some tapes from ECCW in the West Coast. My tape trading days, I had a lot of stuff, of course, from the major American independent companies such as Ring of Honor. My experience here in Canada, I had gone to a couple of UWA shows, which, of course, was a huge deal. As a matter of fact, many of the wrestlers on the Ontario indie scene that you see today were heavily influenced by some of the things that happened in the UWA. A lot of them were fans that attended those shows, and some of them even did wrestle in those shows. So there you go. It hasn't been around for quite some time now, but still, it was a big part of Ontario independent wrestling, and I went to, I think, 6 shows total for UWA, but then I hit a financial snafu, and not long after that, they were gone, sadly. Even during my time with UWA, I went through scattered shows all across Ontario with a couple friends of mine. UWA, went with my good buddy Jeff Taylor, who I mentioned on the podcast before. And yes, I remember seeing, again, someone prominent on the Ontario Indie circuit today, Carter Mason, seeing him at some of these UWA shows, and then remember years later seeing him as a wrestler. I'm like, oh, I remember him. He used to be in the crowd. Like, he was sitting not too far away from me a lot of the time. I didn't know him, but I recognized his face. So anyway, I wanted to get back into independent wrestling again for the sheer fact that I'd met a fella by the name of Josh Remmelzwaal. I met my friend Josh through my friend Mike Bertu, and Mike, of course, and I were big wrestling fans that went to the same church together. Yes, I used to go to church. And he told me about Josh. Josh, very vast knowledge of professional wrestling, very smart about it too. Not in the typical smart mark sense. Josh seemed to have some logic that a lot of the smart marks were void of, it seemed. And I found out later that he was involved in some way with Alpha-1 wrestling. I met Josh in 2010, the same year Alpha-1 pretty much got going. And I said, and I should mention that in this show, Alpha-1 hadn't been around very long. They're pretty much still in their very infancy. And I didn't know the people who ran it at the time. And, well, you know what? I can say it now because he pretty much came out and said it during a show. So, yes, Ethan Page. Yeah, so no need to keep kayfabe there when he actually revealed it on an Alpha-1 show. I think it was actually the last show they did, he came out and said it. So, anyway, they had mentioned him by his, okay, I won't, even though most people know it, but I'm still not going to say his real name on the air. But, yeah, so they referred to him by his real name. I didn't know they were referring to this wrestler. And because this is how I also met Justin Coleman, who I ran into in the mall many times. He had actually handed me flyers for these shows I just could not attend due to timing or whatever. I used to run into him a lot at Lime Ridge Mall, a lot, and sometimes Jackson Square as well, a little bit of both. And I knew he was into wrestling, and I met him again through Josh. I hadn't seen him in a while, and I said, I remember you from the mall. Justin and I hadn't become the friends that we would later become at that point, but so it was more so I was talking to Josh. Josh was on my Facebook. We'd message each other, just chit-chat about wrestling. I thought Josh had a really good knowledge of a lot of things. So finally, this was in early February of 2011. And let me give you, again, like I do in some other podcasts, a little picture of how things are for me. At this point, I'm almost 28. I was in a rut. My life was not going very well. A lot of that was my own fault. Sadly, there was tension. I was living with my parents at that point. At this point in my late 20s, I've been in and out of, moving on my own and then moving home. And I mainly had moved back to help look after my little sister. My little sister was adopted about a year and a half before this, at the age of 3. At this point, she's almost 5. And so I moved back home to help out because both my parents worked full-time jobs. So, of course, they would need somebody there because they couldn't always just rely on a babysitter. But they figured, my mom made me a deal where, I'd still have to pay rent, obviously, but, and pay my way there. But she'd, knock, a little bit off whenever I look after my sister. But I didn't really need stuff to be knocked off because she's my sister. I would have done it for free. You know what I mean? I would have done it without having anything docked off my rent. Of course, I'm not going to say that. But anyway, I digress. So, I'm living back home, and again, my mom, who I normally get along with, we had a bit of tension. Again, it's just two adults butting heads. It wasn't really, anything terrible. Just we had our issues, and it is what it is. But but it was still rough to be there sometimes, and I was always looking for an escape. And even though as much as I adored my little sister, it was hard. I just needed to get out. And she had nothing to do with it because I thought she was wonderful. And I thought she was growing up to be just a wonderful little girl. And you know what? Hey, she's almost 15 now, and she's just a wonderful young lady now. So, Josh, talking to Josh on Facebook, he says to me, you should check out Alpha-1 Wrestling. Like, he'd mentioned it. And I said, okay, when's their show? He said, on the 20th. I said, okay, where? Obviously here in Hamilton, but where? He's like, Firefighters Convention Hall, like, deep on the mountain. Like, bordering near, like, Stony Creek area. Almost practically the boonies. Like, far east mountain. And run Dartnell Road. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's not too bad. But I'm thinking, wait, that's the day of the chamber. And he said, well, the show's at 4. And it's true, chamber doesn't start till 8. And I usually go to the theater, the Silver City, I think that's what it was called at the time, theater, in the plaza on Paramount, sitting around Stony Creek area there. And so I said, yeah, I could just head to the theater right after this is done. So I remember it was a very cold day, snow on the ground, and so I said, yeah, I will check out this show. Josh gave me the flyer when I saw him in person not long after that, and then I bought my ticket off of him. So what sucked about it, though, the only thing that sucked about this show, I had to sit alone. Because Josh had people around him. There were no seats available. Little did I know, actually, my future girlfriend, who I'd spent over 3 years with, was at this show, and wouldn't meet her for another almost close to 2 years. But yeah, so he had a lot of people around, a lot of his friends, which is fine, whatever. I was just there to have a good time and enjoy myself. I was just, it just sucked I didn't have anybody to enjoy it with. But it is what it is. I tried to invite a couple friends out, but they weren't interested. So, the big attraction on the show, Rhino, is going to be here. And apparently, from the way Josh sold it to me, Rhino will be taking on the top heel in Alpha-1 Wrestling, Ethan Page. Now, that name, of course, sounds probably very familiar to some of you listening to this. I know some of the audience I have, a pretty decent portion of them watch Impact Wrestling, so you're well aware of who he is. At this point, he was just an ambitious young man just trying to make it. And with this company here, he had the perfect platform to, I guess the old term is, hone his craft. And damn did he do a good job. So I'm sitting there. I'm eager for the show to start. And I remember my buddy Davis at the time was texting me, asking what time I'm going to be at the theater. And I said, I don't know. I'm at a wrestling show right now. You're at a wrestling show? He was confused. I said, yes. I tried to invite you to this. It's Alpha-1 Wrestling. He's like, oh, yeah, that's today, too. You're going to make it on time? I'm like, yeah. It's fine. So, yeah, it's at the Firefighters Convention Hall in Hamilton. And like I said, I'm excited to see what will unfold here. Now, some of these guys I knew of, because again, like I said, it was whether it be UWA or scattered just spot shows or even shows of promotions that I had learned later that were actually pretty significant. They had worked a lot of these shows. I'd actually seen a couple of these guys on YouTube because I just watched a lot of random wrestling on YouTube. Couldn't tell you what promotion I saw them in, but they were easy to remember. So, if I get the order mixed up here, I apologize. As again, it's been a long time. Usually I keep notes on these things, but I do remember, I think, all the matches. So, from what I recall, the earlier matches, again, forgive me if I get the order wrong with these first couple here. Johnny Wave and Tyson Dukes for number one contendership of the Alpha-1 Zero Gravity title. Now, I had heard of Tyson Dukes, actually. I had actually heard of him. I'd seen him wrestle dark matches for the WWE. As I said, I didn't recognize this guy. He did dark matches. And I remember seeing him on TNA a few times. So anyway, and Johnny Wave I thought looked pretty cool. Like, okay, this could be interesting. So I'm thinking, okay, just maybe it's narrow-minded of me to think, but I'm thinking because Tyson has been on TV and has been with the two major companies at some point, I thought he was probably going to win this. That night, again, I'd seen some of his stuff on YouTube at this point. I remember, again, right from the get-go, as soon as the opening bell, these guys just went. You know what I mean? They just were already ready to tear it down. Now, like I said, I've been to a lot of independent shows, like in the last, from 05 to 07, but kind of hadn't really gone in the last, few years with the like I said, I didn't really go too much. And I always liked independent wrestling, but again, this right away, at the top of the show, I'm just like, I can't believe what I'm seeing here. And the atmosphere of these fans that are just right into this opening match here, and it was exciting. It was off the charts, and I'm thinking to myself, how am I not, at the age of 28, not doing something wrestling related as much as I love it? From the opening match, that's what I was thinking. I thought to myself, I really want to, be a part of this, even if I'm not going to be a wrestler. And I guess it's my love as a fan that truly got me into it again. The independent scene. Maybe just because I've been just out of touch with it, just circumstances hadn't allowed me to go to certain shows, I guess. Or maybe I just didn't know they existed. Either way, I was having a blast from the get-go. And Johnny won. Much to my surprise, I was still happy because I really dug this guy. I thought he was pretty cool. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I'm in for a good day. As I said, I'm in for a good day. And and seeing what I would see later with the wrestlers selling their own merch, really putting their brand over, it made me respect how hard these guys had to work to make money in the world of independent wrestling. Yeah, you know what I mean. Even a recent, photo exhibit about wrestling in Hamilton, in the art district here in the city, revealed that, most of them, pretty much all of them, I'd say 99.9% of them have regular jobs through the week. and he wrestled on the weekend. That's nothing. Apparently that's something that's it's been quite prominent in the world of professional wrestling. Next up was a match between Bruno Davis and Louis Aviro. I didn't know too much about these two. Louis would be around a little bit. We tried to book him a few times, but things didn't work out. Of course, that's another podcast another day, Time at Fringe Pro Wrestling, which, by the way, actually, my business partner from Pro Wrestling Ontario, one of them anyway, Andy Martin, will be hopefully addressing that on his hopefully one day podcast. I'm hoping. So yes, I'd definitely like him to tell that story as well. He's going to be talking about the days of Fringe. I'm going to be doing that as well, probably. And on a future podcast, don't know when yet. Because again, all that happened on this event ties into that. So I didn't remember too much about that match. It ended in a no contest. And then next up was Psycho Mike Rollins against Ashley Six. Now again, I even though I don't remember much about the second match, I remember I enjoyed it. You know what I mean? I remember I was still pretty into it. But man, and Ashley Six I thought had a really cool look. He was with Ethan Page. Had their entourage going, Mr. Melo. And I gotta say this, and he's probably gonna think I'm sucking up to him if he's listening to this. You have no power, so there's nothing to suck up to. Melo, you know what? He really was a good throwback to the old style manager. Again, really good throwback. Did everything in his power to get his guys over. You know, he was passionate. He wasn't afraid to look like a fool. Get his comeuppance when he had it coming. So yes, he was a great old school style manager who I thought was just fantastic. So Psycho Mike Rollins, like, this guy is hilarious. And not only is he hilarious, but he's a fun wrestler. He can really go in that ring. I thought Ashley Six was really good here as well. Ash would be a major part of Fringe Pro Wrestling later on, which be a significant part of, which I'll get to. And yes, as I'm watching Psycho Mike, I'm looking at him like, this guy comes off as a star. A tried and true star. And that's what some of the things I like about a lot of the people on the independent wrestling scene is that, because there's a lot of anti-smart marks out there who are, mainstream wrestling apologists, try indie geeks, this and that, not realizing that most of the guys they cheer for in WWE are indie guys, or they try to go the Baron Corbin route saying, he's not indie, he's legit, whatever, you know what I mean? It's the quote-unquote anti-smarks who are every bit as annoying as the people they're trying to be the opposite of. And I like the fact that there are the guys who try to go out of their way to look like a star and look like something. And Psycho Mike definitely did that. He wasn't unpredictable for the sake of being unpredictable. He was, again, trying for the reaction. He wasn't just kind of hoping it would happen, but he was trying hard for it, and he would get it. Most of the time, I'd say, probably 99 times out of 100, he got it. Maybe even more, maybe 100 out of 100. I didn't really see any... I haven't seen a Psycho Mike match where the crowd didn't respond to what he was doing. And he also did it for the sake of, this, again, the story that would be told in the match as well. He was there to entertain, but he was also there to do his thing in that ring as well. I mean, he was a complete package. He still is. Anyway, Mike won the match. And he would actually be a significant part of Alpha-1 for quite a while at this point. In this next year or two, I should say. And you know what? Yeah, he was just off the charts. He was very popular. The crowd loved him. I loved him. I instantly became a Psycho Mike fan about maybe 2-3 minutes into this match. So next up was the match to crown the first Alpha-1 Zero Gravity champion. In this match was Anthony Fiasco, Andrew Davis, Alessandro Del Bruno and Timothy Crane. Now now looking at Del Bruno, looking at his size, I'm thinking this guy's going to be exciting. I bet some of you thought I was going a different route, didn't you? And for those of you who don't know, who are actually listening to this, that don't know much about the Ontario Independent Wrestling Circuit, look these guys up on YouTube. Find them on wrestling stream services that they are on, that you can pay for. But it's worth the money, believe me. A lot of these guys I'm naming, a lot of these guys I'm about to name. And I remember, I could tell Crane was a heel. And I don't know, just a lot of stuff he did reminded me of Raven. And I'm a huge Raven fan. So I'm thinking that just this is as a fan. I'm not trying to be smart or anything like that, because I actually know Tim. He's a pretty good guy. You're not Raven. And it actually, I tried to chant it. I don't think it really got over, but a couple of people chirped at him that you're not Raven. The chant didn't start, but people started shouting it at him. And I'm like, at least I did something there. So, and he gave us, I remember he gave me a dirty look. And again, you remember that episode of The Simpsons where Homer, there's that mob war going on, where that little guy is just standing there and he's about to, you're anxious for what he's going to do? That's how I felt about Del Bruno as I saw him come to the ring. Like, whew, this guy's going to do something. What's it going to be? It's going to be exciting. And it was. This was a really fun match to crown the champion. First Alpha-1 Zero Gravity champion. I was cheering for Del Bruno. Because, again, just watching him do his thing in that ring, he's exciting. He was a good storyteller, the way he would work with guys. Again, most of his opponents were bigger than him. But he would find a way to work, when you're suspending disbelief, you would find he'd make you believe that the way he's fighting is believable against these bigger opponents. He's always been that way. And I think that's what makes him so good. Again, I thought his timing as a babyface, his comebacks were just unbelievable. And again, as a fan, he simply popped me with the things he would do. The comebacks he'd make. Timothy Crane would win the match, become the Zero Gravity champion. And I'm thinking, my goodness, I'm probably enjoying this more than I'm going to enjoy the Chamber later. I even remember texting my buddy saying the Chamber is going to have to do a pretty damn good job to top this one. And I'm just thinking, can it get any better? I enjoyed all those UWA shows I went to and that, but I'm like, I don't know, for some reason, something about this show and the wrestlers, the characters, they sparked something in me. The fans, it was the fans and the passion that they had. These guys, again, like I said, doing their best to get their brand over so they can make money. There's something to respect about that. It showed in their passion for the world of professional wrestling. And I'm thinking, these guys, every single one of them, I thought this too, obviously, and I knew this about the wrestlers that I saw on TV. But these are guys who are out there who watch those same things I watched on TV growing up, but are now trying to be those guys, and that's a compliment. That is a compliment in the biggest way, because I admire these guys for living that dream. In doing it for whatever money they can make. But a lot of it just seemed for a sheer thrill as well. And again, that's another stigma that I think a lot of people try to put us, a lot of quote-unquote fans try to put on wrestling. Oh, they're in it for the money. There's not. What's wrong with wanting to make money doing something you love? Seriously. They sold out. Okay, sure. Whatever. They did not sell out. To me, in life, if you can make money doing something you love, then it's not really work that way. I'm sure there's times it feels like it. I'm sure for these guys, for any wrestler, it feels like work at a time or two. That's how the burnout begins for a lot of them. But you know what? The fact that they're making the effort to make that money and to get to a higher point, something I greatly admire. Something I admire about them to this day. Passion, drive of independent wrestlers. So after that, Derrick Wilde, who I had actually seen on a few shows, I think an LLW show, I knew who he was, against Cheech, who was very popular, and a fella who many would say, and I wouldn't disagree with them, is the best wrestler on the Ontario independent circuit in the last decade, the Walking Weapon, Josh Alexander. Now, he wasn't known as the Walking Weapon yet at this point. But be that as it may, he still looked like someone who was just gonna freaking murder you in the ring. Not like he didn't look like a serial killer, like say for the Ontario indie scene, like a Holden Albright or way back when, as I mentioned on my last podcast, Cactus Jack. Just a guy who's gonna rip you with his bare hands in a sense of battle. And this was so much fun. Cheech, I thought, was just a lot of fun. Just a cool, laid-back dude. But again, when that bell rang, in a way, somewhat reminiscent, not the same, but just that laid-back approach, that natural aura, like Rob Van Dam. Just have that natural presence and the natural personality. Josh Alexander, again, like I said, looked like he's just going to beat the hell out of you. And do it every which way he can. Derrick Wilde, again, exciting to watch. So this was a lot of fun. And again, I'm cheering. Cheech is who I was into here. Derrick Wilde won. But again, I'm loving all three of these guys. I'm thinking, I missed out. I missed out. How have I not been more involved in independent wrestling? How? Even though I've loved it for a while, but wasn't truly passionate about it like I should have been. And it was just great. Next up was the singles match between Michael Elgin and Colin Delaney. Again, I remember these two as well. I'd seen them before. I thought Elgin was just a brick house. So Michael Elgin and Colin Delaney put on a really good show here. Now again, it's a significant size difference. Now again, usually a Sting Vader formula, be it because it doesn't matter, babyface, heel, whatever side the big man or small man are on. The Sting Vader formula seems to work in every aspect that way. I remember Taker and Mysterio's match at Royal Rumble 2010. They kind of had that little formula going. They were both faces at the time, mind you. But Elgin and Delaney here, they made it believable. And you know what? It's hard to do. It's hard to do. And there are some, people who just ignore it altogether and just act like they're the same size. But I mentioned Del Bruno earlier. Del Bruno has never, ever, in my opinion, wrestled like he was the same size as his larger opponents. He would wrestle, again, like I said, in a style where it was believable that he was able to out-strategize them with his quickness and his, the kicks. Again, Del Bruno is known for those amazing kicks. Because Del Bruno's strikes with those kicks look so convincing that it could take any big man down. So anyway, again, I like these two as well because I like what I've seen from them before. Right in this, Elgin won. Then next up is Rhino. Now, I'm a big Rhino fan. I have been since his ECW days, and I was glad to see him and Ethan Page. Again, the man who I was told by Josh was Josh Remmelzwaal, who was the top heel. And would later find out was, steering the ship here. And he went up against Rhino. Like I said, Ethan Page and Rhino here. So again, I'm excited because it's Rhino. I'm thinking Rhino's going to beat the piss out of this guy. And I, again, just as a fan, hated Ethan Page. He was the perfect, cocky, little smarmy dickhead heel. And I mean that in the biggest compliment, and I'm sure he'd be the first to say thank you. again, watching guys like Melo, Ashley Six, this whole entourage here, it worked. Again, like I said, you just see these guys, we're not only having fun, but trying to make what they do believable. And you know what? They succeeded. That's what I loved about watching this stuff, this show. And I told you even earlier in the show, just barely into the first match, that I'm thinking, why am I not involved in this sort of stuff? And somehow. And of course, again, I booed the hell out of Ethan Page when he won the match. And again, like I said, I liked him because he was, just a very cocky heel that you just wanted to see beaten mercilessly. But like I said, I even said I could watch this guy on TV. And I'd be glued to the set to see what he's going to try to pull off. It was a great, this was a lot of fun. And again, at the time, I didn't know he was the guy behind the scenes. I did not know. Like I said, Josh Remmelzwaal told me his real name. I didn't know it was the same guy. But anyway, main event. And I talked about this on my Inside Bill's Mind podcast, sadly, when Brodie Lee passed away. But I am going to repeat the story here. Alpha male title match. The Night Train Justin Sane defending his title against Brodie Lee. And again, I mentioned this before. When I first saw Brodie Lee, again, people say wrestlers should look like wrestlers and wear like kick pads and okay. When he walked out, that big beard, that greasy looking hair, that dirty tank top, those jeans, very sweaty man. But again, it's like he was a guy that would just fight you in the streets. He was a guy like that would fight you out. There's this party in the boonies, and there's a tough, just backwoods kind of guy that would just beat the piss out of you. And backwoods being what would happen in his WWE career, like with the Wyatt family, made perfect sense. This backwood kind of hick in some ways. But he looked like he just wanted to fight. Just wanted to beat someone up and enjoy it. Just looked like a very nasty man, and that's what I liked about him. He didn't look like everyone else. And that was another thing about this show. Everybody seemed different. Everybody seemed so different. And that was the appeal of independent wrestling now to me. And they're making the most to get these characters over. And I'm thinking, Brodie Lee, this guy looks like someone who, again, this is the main event. I said to myself, like, this is a guy who looked like he is a main eventer, that he should be a champion. It looks like he'd win in a real fight. In a real contest. Then came Justin Sane. I'm thinking, oh my God, look at this guy. Not only is he in incredible shape, but you just look at him and he brings, like, you can tell he's going to bring the intensity. I hadn't even watched a minute of him yet. I'd heard a bit about him. But he looked like he was going to bring the intensity even before I saw him do anything. So it was clear cut in this match. Sane was the babyface, Brodie was the heel. And again, fitting Brodie Lee's his name, because the first thing I thought when I saw his face, Bruiser Brodie. Like a backwoods version of Bruiser Brodie. And I was thinking, because I've heard people, when he was in this run with Luke Harper, they criticized his gear, and not realizing that's part of his character, for one, and be saying, he doesn't look like a real wrestler. Shut up. Anyway, so Brodie Lee and Justin Sane just bring it full throttle. Just an intense, aggressive battle every time they hit each other with anything, be it a high spot or just a simple strike. It looked freaking amazing. This looked like a tried and true main event wrestling match. Not indie, like not just indie. It looked like any kind of wrestling match. It was a main event. And again, just watching these two, again, they're battling. They made it look like they're battling for the big prize, which they were. And again, I'm cheering, and I'm, in these previous other matches, but this match, I'm glued to my seat because I want to see what they're going to do, because I know that they're just doing something great the first couple minutes in. And again, Justin had that intensity, that natural intensity. Brodie was that natural shit kicker when he looked like he could just knock you out with his boot without even trying, like without even putting full force behind it. That's how great these guys looked. And it just flowed so well. It didn't feel long. I actually wanted more by the end of it. Like, more. But no, Justin won, retained the title. At the end of that match, I said to myself, I want to be a part of this. I want to somehow be involved in the Ontario Independent Wrestling circuit, be it as a ring announcer, referee, whatever, manager, commentator, maybe even one day promote a company. And I got to do all those things. Because even though I was convinced I wanted to be a part of something after that first match, it was this main event that truly made me say, yeah. And I mentioned this on my other podcast, yeah, this is something I want to be a part of. So after the show, before I headed to the theater, I talked to Josh and I said, hey buddy, I said, thanks for inviting me, it was a great time. When's the next one? And he told me, gave me all the info. And you know what? I was excited. And they'd be at the Germania Club, which again, that's going to be a whole other podcast I'm going to talk about as well. So the reason why this was so influential was because, well, it made me want to be a part of the independent scene. I started going to more Alpha-1 shows as a fan. And then, of course, Josh and Justin Graves, who he's known as a wrestler. My buddy Justin Coleman. Like I said, I just helped out with little things. The chairs, stuff like that. Cleaning up. I got to meet Tommy Dreamer, who I thought was amazing. I got to meet a lot of people. Smith Hart was at a lot of these shows. Smith Hart, the oldest of all the Hart siblings. The late Smith Hart. And got to meet him, got to chat with him for a little while. That was such a great experience. And just being a part of these amazing shows. In a way, get my foot in the door. Initially, Alpha-1 hit a snafu, and again, that's another story. But they were going to shut down. And so myself, again, Justin Coleman, Josh Remmelzwaal, a couple other people, we're going to start a promotion. And we did, even though Alpha-1 did not end up shutting down, of course, as, yeah, duh, spoiler, yeah, okay. They did not shut down, they continued, but we still decided to, go through with it, because we were going to try, it was a bit weird, because I felt a little apprehensive about it, because again, I'm still learning stuff here. And I think, is it right to go up against them? And Josh made it sound the way where we're not going up against them. We're another company. We were on another part of town. when Fringe launched. Well, our first show wasn't, but our home, which would be for the next couple of years, would shift all the way to the other end of the town. Again, Stony Creek area. Germania Club is not far from downtown, the downtown core. So, yeah. Though they ended up moving away from the Germania Club and going to Stony Creek as well. But either way, Alpha-1 Wrestling continued to produce such amazing shows, amazing talents, great storytelling, very compelling stuff, great characters. Again, just guys who are passionate and work their asses off. Like I said, I want to be a part of that with Fringe. That's a whole other story for another day. Basically, everything from that show. Now, with two business partners, we run Pro Wrestling Ontario, company that is out of Burlington. As if it wasn't for this show, I might not even be there doing what I love. And I got to do, again, those aspirations I had. I've gotten to do all of that commentary, ring announcing, which I still do both those things for other promotions. And being a promoter, even getting some booking experience. It's been something. And I thank Alpha-1 Wrestling for igniting my passion that day. And I thank my friend Josh Remmelzwaal for inviting me to that show. I'm sure he actually might be listening. He does listen to my podcast sometimes. So thank you, Josh, if you're listening, buddy. So moving on from that day, going back to that day, I left, again, it was a cold day. Again, it was February. It's a cold freaking day. And I'm bundled up, but still, walking in again, it wasn't quite the boonies, but it's teetering on it. And walking to the theater, which didn't seem like a long walk, but it was. I didn't get there till 7:56. My friend Courtney is texting me, wondering where I am, because her and her friend Colin there. Courtney worked at that theater as well, so of course she would watch it. And her friend Colleen, they were best friends. They'd watch them. So I get there for WWE Elimination Chamber 2011. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that one. I'm just saying, this was the same day. This was Day of Wrestling. But still, again, WWE in 2011. 2011 WWE, again, of course, obviously mainly remembered for CM Punk. But that wasn't until months later. Again, I cover that in the archives. Check it out. So I give more of a patrol what WWE was like in 2011. Really, 2011, there's still a lot of good stuff happening. Edge, it was weird thing, because the year before they tried with Edge as a babyface when he returned, somehow it just didn't seem to catch on like I guess they'd hoped, and they turned him heel again, but then he organically, the fans turned him babyface late in 2010 again. Because he was becoming a little more unhinged when he snapped on the Raw GM computer and smashed it to bits, and stuff like that just seemed to get him over as a face, and they just kept it that way. So anyway, Elimination Chamber 2011 now, of course, is the final stop to WrestleMania. So I get there, Davis is wondering, Davis saved me a seat, thankfully, and I'm there with some of my other friends as well. And I want to say my friend Kyle McCluskey came with me as well. Yeah, actually, he was there, come to think of it. And there were some guys from the Alpha-1 show there. There's some of the fans. I recognized them, that they were there. They must have driven there, lucky bastards, walking in the freaking cold. To be fair, I didn't know about them. I didn't know them back then. And I actually see some of the roster at these theater shows later, like the pay-per-views. But anyway, I digress. So back to the show. Elimination Chamber 2011. So again, everything's, even when the product is not the greatest, everything's still intriguing at WrestleMania season. I don't care what anyone says. It never really stops being intriguing, even if not everything's perfect. Okay. Again, but early 2011, in hindsight, was not a very bad era. So, at this point, they're really building up Alberto Del Rio, which, I'll say this, again, really good wrestler. Nothing wrong with him fundamentally. As a fan, though, I just didn't do it for me. I don't know what it was. He just never did it for me. Maybe because he was just, I felt he was just a Latino JBL. And again, I didn't really overly love JBL either, even as just watching him as a heel. I didn't really, again, great at the character, you know what I mean? But I don't know what it was. I really can't pinpoint it. I didn't find Del Rio boring or anything like that. It's just, I wasn't overly thrilled to watch him wrestle. But anyway, him and Kofi Kingston, they remember they opened the show again. I get there just in time, like I said. And I'm telling Davis all about this independent show I went to. Barely paying attention to this match between Del Rio and Kofi. Kofi, who I really like and still do to this day, beats Del Rio, wins that famous cross-arm breaker. Really good match. And yeah, like it was something. It was, you know what I mean? It was an experience I wanted to share, that Alpha-1 show, and you know, he seemed a little intrigued. Sadly, I never got him to come out to the show, but still, it was very, very intriguing, and I wanted him to share that experience because he was one of my, you know, good wrestling friends at that time. So at this point, this again, like already back then, they started doing Elimination Chamber matches, like a pay-per-view. So after the Del Rio match, the first one, Edge defended his World Heavyweight Championship against Rey Mysterio, Kane, Drew McIntyre, Big Show, and Wade Barrett. This match was a lot of fun. I will say this here, too, in this match, Drew stole the show in this one, because he looked, again, now they were pushing Drew as the chosen one. Obviously, we know that didn't go overly well. I think fans saw it as something that was contrived and being shoved down their throats. But Drew here just looked like a shit kicker. He was throwing people through pods and everything. And I remember looking over at Davis, and I saying, you know, if they really want to push this guy to the moon, this is what they really should have been doing with him the whole time. I remember hearing actual wrestlers criticize Drew. Now, of course, I never thought of it until they brought it up. When some of these wrestlers I know on this independent level will say about Drew, they say Drew's a really good wrestler, but he doesn't use the ring. They say he's just trying to do moves most of the time. He doesn't use the ring. And I'm watching some of his matches and I'm thinking, thinking back in hindsight, but then again, like I said, I would hear this months later after this show, and then Drew was put in 3-man band. But yeah, and I'm thinking, well, Drew used the chamber really well. Well, he looked like a badass in this match. Edge won, retained the title, which again, Edge had some good momentum here, and again, sadly, wouldn't be around much longer. Would retire several weeks after this, just shortly after WrestleMania, and would not be back for another decade. But it's good to see him doing his thing again. So that was, again, this was a lot of fun. I enjoyed, I like the chamber concept. I do. I think it's done really well in the past. I just think, sadly, most of them now are foregone conclusions. That's the only problem. The chamber matches themselves are usually enjoyable more often than not. So, but again, I just wish that they would shake things up. They used to shake things up with the chamber a bit going into WrestleMania back in the day, but it's around this time they just started, you know, really just, again, a foregone conclusion. Next up was the Core going up against Santino Marella and Vladimir Kozlov. I will say this, Vladimir and Santino team was surprisingly hilarious. Kozlov was somebody they tried to push as a monster heel for a long time. I guess people just didn't really buy into it, which is weird because he looked the part. I guess, I don't know, from what a lot of fans told me, they just thought it was generic. For me, again, he didn't do much for me either. I thought he looked the part, I thought he was convincing, but just, I don't know, something about it. And I didn't think there was anything special about like a lot of the main event level matches he'd have with like Triple H or whoever. Yeah, but this tag team worked as a comedy tag team, and they had Tamina in their corner. Yeah, never liked Tamina. And Santino and Vladimir, I guess I had a good shtick going. Yeah, Heath Slater and Justin Gabriel. They had Ezekiel Jackson in their corner. Heath and Justin won the titles. So that was kind of like Vladimir and Santino. Just, yeah, there wasn't much after that. So yeah, The Miz defended his championship, his IWGP championship, against Jerry the King Lawler. Now, for those who'd forgotten, this is where the Lawler-Michael Cole feud started. Well, it was not this match, but again, it was this whole concept just a bit before this, where the King, of course, was very popular among fans for his commentary, and some of them will learn to appreciate his legendary wrestling background as well. They had a title match on Raw. Now, Michael Cole was starting his heel turn. His heel turn was underway at this point. And he always used to suck up to The Miz a lot for whatever reason. And I guess it would pay off here because a match with The Miz and Lawler was a ladder match. And Cole... Sorry, I should say TLC match, actually. It was a TLC match. And Cole interfered for whatever reason, has sparked the Cole-Jerry Lawler feud, which started out pretty good and interesting and captivating, and then, well, yeah, I don't know, that's another podcast for another day. So, obviously there was interest to see Lawler, because again, that in that match, so that TLC match, the crowd was really behind Lawler. Because it was that story being told, he never, as much success as he's had in his career, as much as an icon he was in Memphis, he wanted to be the WWE champion. Made sense. And I think it wouldn't have hurt to give Lawler like a 1 or 2 week reign. To be perfectly honest, it definitely wouldn't have been a long-term thing, but again, he could have just easily won it on Raw, maybe had like a successful title defense the next week on Raw or whatever, and then lose it back to the Miz or whatever at the Rumble or something. Like I think, or even that's what I mean. Like they could have, in my opinion, it wouldn't have hurt to give Lawler a 1 or 2 week reign, especially with the way the fans were reacting that night. I think they could have called an audible. But again, that's just me playing fantasy booker. I'm not saying they made a bad decision either. That's just saying. Anyway, this match, it was fine. I remember their match on Raw more. The TLC matches had more, with the crowd, the way they were that night, and the story that they were telling was much better in that concept. This one just kind of seemed like just a pathway for Miz to get to WrestleMania, just for him to kill time. We all knew he was winning. Again, that's like I said, this is when these Chamber pay-per-views started kind of getting kind of predictable. So, then there was the Elimination Chamber match for a title shot at Miz's title at WrestleMania. Because like I said, Del Rio had won the Rumble. I forgot to mention that during his match. They were building up for WrestleMania to face the World Heavyweight Champion, which is still Edge at this point. So it was Cena, CM Punk, John Morrison, King Sheamus, oh god, and Randy Orton and R-Truth. Okay, the King I like Sheamus. Okay, he gets shit on a lot. I don't mind Sheamus. He's fine for whatever role they put him in. Again, he's got something unique about him. Good enough for me. When they put the King Sheamus thing on, he looked like just a terrible cosplayer trying his hardest to stand out, trying to fit in at a convention. It just didn't look good to me. And John Cena and CM Punk had a nice little feud going at this point, which, again, obviously would definitely accelerate later in the year, but kind of just stalled. And would stall even, the brakes were kind of, at this point the brakes were kind of pressed and it just completely stalled after this show. Cena won the Elimination Chamber. I was cheering hard for Punk. I was cheering hard for Punk. He was the last one, even though I knew Punk wasn't going to win. I was just kind of doing it because Colin and Courtney were big Cena fans, so I'm just kind of doing it to kind of chirp them a bit, and it always worked. And, Cena won. We all knew he was, and it's kind of like, okay, whatever. Still a good pay-per-view. Fun enough for what it was. Chamber matches were good, enjoyable, but foregone conclusion. But the talk that next day with my wrestling friends was the Alpha-1 show. As much as I still like WWE, again, that Alpha-1 show is what was on my mind the next couple of days. And I couldn't wait to go to the next one. So yes, again, that's going to wrap things up this week. Next week, since I also did Super Brawl 2 this week, I think I should do and start WrestleMania 8 for WrestleMania season. Yes, indeed. Next week will be WrestleMania 8. The double main event. Yes. Sid Justice versus Hulk Hogan. Ric Flair versus defending his WWE Championship against the Macho Man, but it wasn't supposed to be that way, was it? And it kind of all ties together because I did Royal Rumble 92 recently. So yeah, doing a lot of 1992 stuff here. So yes, I know people say, Bill, you do too much WWE stuff, WWF stuff. Well, I try to do a lot of WCW stuff too. I try to do some other stuff. But keep in mind, a lot of my fandom was with WWF, but there'll be a lot of WCW stuff around the corner, even some more ECW stuff coming up. And a lot of other different concepts that I'm working on right now as well to shake things up a little bit. So yes, but next, it is WrestleMania season. It's only fair I stick with WWF, WWE or whatever. But no, I give you a little bit of independent wrestling here, and there'll be more of that coming too in the future. So look forward to that. I didn't want to start doing independent wrestling episodes until I did this episode, the show that truly gave me and ignited my passion for the local independent wrestling scene. So thank you so much for that. So until next time, yes, follow me on social media, BillChase33 on Twitter and on Instagram. Also, add me on Facebook if you want. I want to talk some old style wrestling or current wrestling, whatever. It's all up to you. But either way, until next time, this is your friend and mine, Bill Chase, quoting again the late great Billy Red Lyons, a tried and true Hamilton wrestling legend, when I tell you all, don't you dare miss it. Thank you for listening to Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. If you'd like to make a contribution to the show, can one of you out there just follow him on Twitter? He's only one away from 400, for crying out loud.